So how do we go about critically reading a research article? And I'm just going to go over, there are going to be 4 steps. I'm going to really hit the final 3 steps in this tutorial. The first step is you actually need to find a research article. You will need to go see another tutorial on how to find scholarly research. But in order to find something that you can critique, in order to critique something, you need to find it first. Once you find an article, or once you are being presented with something, you need to do some pre-reading. And in a moment, I'll go through some questions that you can be asking yourselves before you even sit down and read the article. Good readers don't just ask questions at the beginning, but they are constantly, continually thinking about questions during reading. So there are certain steps that I want you to think about during reading as well. And finally, after you're done reading, you really need to reflect and think critically about the article that you've read. So let's go to the number 2, answer pre-reading questions, and I'm going to present you with an article. So let's go give it a try. Before you even start reading an article, you really do need to spend some time with pre-reading. And there are a couple of different pre-reading questions that you need to ask. First, you need to ask previewing questions. And then you need to think about some background knowledge questions. So we're going to go through an article that I chose, and we're going to look at some previewing questions and then some background knowledge questions. One of the first questions that you should have when you read a research article is who has written the article. In this case, you can see that the author is Danielle V. Dennis, but it doesn't say where she is from. You would have to scroll to the very end of the article. Sometimes they put the author's affiliation at the very beginning of the article, and sometimes they put it at the end of the article. In this case, Danielle Dennis is actually a professor from University of South Florida, and again, you could scroll down to the very end and it'll tell you that. And you need to give finding out where the author is from gives some legitimacy. If the author's from a university, you can tell you've got a better sense that it's going to be a more higher quality article than maybe a consultant or someone who doesn't have an academic background. You also want to look at where the article is from. This article is from the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy, and you can see that right up at the top there. And that's an article or a journal that is produced by the International Reading Association, and it's a legitimate peer-reviewed article. That means it's reviewed by other professionals before it is submitted for publication. You want to look at when the article is written, and again, that is right up at the very top, December 2009, 2010. And to stay current, you really want to stay within the last, depending on your topic, no longer than a decade ago. So within the last 4 to 5 years, no longer than 10 years back, to really stay current with your research. Finally, you really want to take a look at the references and make sure that this article is fully referenced, that it is a research article that draws upon current research. And I'm even looking at this article right here, and I can tell that they have really drawn upon more recent research by looking at the dates and also by looking at where they are getting their research as well. So those are some pre-reading questions that you need to do before you even start. In addition to some general previewing questions we want to ask ourselves, we also want to ask ourselves some questions about the actual topic, some background knowledge questions. For example, we need to think about, well, what is this topic? And do I have my own ideas, preconceptions, or prejudices about the topic? In this case, the topic is assessment. And I obviously do have some ideas about assessment and prejudices towards this topic or on this topic, as this is a pretty highly charged topic. And actually, you can even see from this heading, I'm not stupid, how assessment drives inappropriate reading instruction. I can tell that this author has a particular bent on this topic as well. And at the moment, even before reading this, I think, I bet you she and I are going to feel similar about how assessment and instruction can be linked in negative ways. So already I'm coming into this reading with this predisposition for, in this case, I think I'm going to like this topic and this perspective on this topic. So I really want to think, what do I know about this topic? Is this a controversial topic, which it is, and what are my thoughts? Because that is going to be shaping how I read this article. And I think it's really important to be made aware of that before you even begin. So you've pre-read, you've done some pre-reading of the article, and now you're actually ready to read the article. As you're reading the article, I would like you to keep in mind a couple of things, especially as it pertains to good research. You want to think, does the author give solid background information? Is the research question clear? How sound is the methodology? Does the study's context, data collection, and sample make sense? And do the assertions flow from the data collection and analysis? So let's take a look. A research article's background information should really be found at the very beginning of the article. And you can see from this article, right in that second paragraph, she talks about the state of accountability. And she situates her study within the national movement of No Child Left Behind. You can also see, if you keep going, she gives some really good background information in terms of references. And she references her article directly in her background information. So, and you can see that right there. She gives a lot of resources and a lot of citations that are relevant. So yes, she does do a good job providing some good background information for her article. Is her research question clear? And I see the research question kind of in that study context. I don't think it is as clear as it could be, because I'm not 100% sure what she's doing, but I have a pretty good idea where it says study context. Her methodology section is followed by the study context, and that is where she explains exactly what she does. And she does a pretty good job here also in using tables to really go through how her method looked. She then organizes her data collection and how she analyzed the data into different groups, and she categorizes these groups by each name. These are kind of illustrative example groups that she's trying to make a point with her article. One thing I like that she does in her data analysis is that she really draws upon prior research to make her points, and that's a really good technique and adds reliability into her assertions. And then after she gives her describes her data, she goes into what makes sense, or basically her assertions from this data collection. So she collected this data, this is what she found, and now she's telling us, what does this mean? And that's what she's doing right here when she talks about tiered instruction for striving readers, organized into a step 1, step 2, step 3 framework to really help demonstrate what does this data tell her and what can the readers do with this data. I think this is a really nice organized way to do this. I really like that she adds figures and tables. Figures and tables really help the reader navigate through your data and the analysis, and this really helps summarize what she found about each one of these representative group samples, and I think this is a really organized way to help her display her data. correctly, she ends with her conclusion, which begins addressing varying needs and abilities, and goes to the end of this article. To be honest, I found the conclusion a bit lacking. I really felt that a conclusion is a really important part of a paper, and this seemed to be not as strong as I think it should have been, especially given her data, what she showed us in her analysis. All right, we've read the article, and now we need to think critically about the article, and that's when we go to our post-reading questions. Okay, so we have read the article, and now we need to think critically about this article. And here are some post-reading questions. First, we need to think, does the text seem trustworthy? In this case, yes. I think the research citations really added legitimacy to the author's assertions. Yes, the data collection seemed very detailed and valid. And the only thing I might add to the trustworthiness would be if she triangulated her data and had multiple sources of data that she drew upon, maybe some case studies and some interviews, not just the numerical data, or had somebody else check her analysis. From all that I could tell, she was pretty much doing this on her own, but maybe some member checking would have increased the trustworthiness of this article. Who are the intended audiences? Her audience for this, she would like administrators and teachers to really be the recipients of this study that she did. Do the arguments sound logical, or are the arguments logical and sound? And yes, her arguments made sense. It flowed from her data. She presented a really good case. She used some really good headings. So very logical argument presentation. Are there any alternative explanations? Well, the author doesn't give any alternative explanations, and this could be a problem, but since she's using individual students to represent a group profile, she might have acknowledged that there can be great variation within groups. However, that really is her point, and I know she doesn't acknowledge this, but I do not think this hurts her trustworthiness in the logic of her explanations. Initially, I felt that a case study of her own classroom was really a weak way to prove her point. Her sample size was really small. I was worried that it was not large enough to make the assertions, especially since she was going against our mandates of, especially RTI type mandates, of using assessment to plan instruction. However, her main goal was to show how varied students could be, and to see that with only a few students actually made her small sample size, not only was it justified, but it actually made a really compelling case. So I was a little concerned with the methodology, but then when she made her case using only a few students, this seemed very, not only justified, but very powerful. This text confirmed my ideas, but by using these 4 students as composite representatives, she made a really strong case for how a one-sized remediation program is not acceptable to meet the variety of needs, even in a small sample. So as I said before, even though she picked a very small sample, which could have been a problem with her making her assertions strong, in this case really came out to be a powerful example and confirmed my feelings about assessment. Am I surprised by what I've read? Initially, I was skeptical of her methodology. I thought that her action research would not make a strong case against using standardized test scores to plan instruction. It seemed like a very weak methodology considering the very large kind of animal that she was attacking with standardized test scores. However, after reading the article, I found that although the data collection was not rigorous, she was able to make a strong case with the data that she collected. So in that case, I was surprised by how powerful her assertions were, given that she used such a small sample and not terribly rigorous methodology. I agree with the points raised in this text. She made a really great case that standardized test results are not helpful to students as we plan appropriate instruction. And I think this article also makes a really good case for differentiated instruction.